There can be a lot of frustration involved in negotiating design and construction contracts on the part of a variety of project participants, whether you're a project owner, a real estate developer, an architect or an engineer or a contractor. I find that there is often a disconnect between people's expectations for how involved the process is, how long it should take, and that can sometimes lead to frustration, which, while I understand the cause of it, I want to try to put it in proper perspective. It is true that there's no virtue in having an overly complex design or construction project, and the length of a contract isn't a virtue in and of itself. But I want people to understand that design and construction is counterintuitively complex. It's more complex than you realize unless you are a design or construction attorney who spends all their time thinking about this. Design and construction projects are extremely dispute prone for reasons that I address in other videos and I'm not going to get into right now. And it's not that way because I want it to be that way. It's that way because it just is, okay? That's the reality, okay? And, when people like me push to try to get a design or construction contract right, to try to make it right-sized for the project, the right length, the right sort of terms around insurance, indemnity, and business deal, and all these other things, I want them to understand why it is that people like me might push them in ways that make them feel frustrated or make them feel like their expectations are not being met in terms of how quick and simple it can be. And it's mostly because what I want for myself and my clients and the people that they work with is to have a successful project. I want people to be happy. I want there to be good work for a fair price. I want there to be no disputes. I'm not trying to necessarily advance the interest of my clients over anyone else's. I mean, everybody's going to be happiest if the project goes well. And to a lesser extent, the reason why I give a lot of attention to these design and construction contracts is because you want to avoid a terrible outcome in the event something awful happens, like a fire or an injury, or if there's a design or a construction defect or a claim. I mean, a good contract is going to be able to deal with those eventualities in a way that allows people to achieve early cost-efficient dispute resolution and get past it. A bad contract, though, is going to be something that is going to, force the parties into, a terrible dispute resolution process that could play out for years, that could leave, one party holding the bag economically, and at the very least is going to injure, everyone's hard-earned business relationships and take, their attention and that of their employees away from what they do best, which is, design and construct. So I want to do a little thought exercise here, So imagine for a moment that somebody gives you a blank piece of paper, and says, write down all the controls that you would expect, to find in the cockpit of, an airplane. And, me, like most people who know nothing about aviation, it's going to be a short list, on that blank sheet of paper. It's going to be speed and steering and navigation and landing gear and radio and, things of that nature. A short list, right? Because it's the Rumsfeldian unknown unknowns. You don't know what you don't know, okay? But if you were to go into the cockpit of an airplane, or at least back when that sort of thing was still possible, you're just dazzled by, the amount of controls. There are thousands of different variables that are, obviously within the ambit of what a pilot has to think about, just visually looking at what a cockpit looks like. And so, I am sort of like the airplane pilot. I am either blessed or afflicted based upon, your perspective with knowledge. I mean, for the last 15 plus years, I've spent roughly 3,000 hours a year, thinking about these issues. It's 45, 50,000 hours of me, working on projects and thinking about these issues. And that's to say nothing about the time that I've spent, teaching students construction law at John Marshall Law School. So I am blessed or afflicted with, this pilot-like knowledge of the thousands of things that, could reasonably be considered on a project. And, I'm not necessarily out to dot every I and cross every T. It's not possible. I'm not trying to get an A on my paper. This is an academic exercise. I'm trying to take the fastest point around the block to get the contract signed so they can get in the drawer and my clients can get forward, with their project. So, I'm certainly able to throw over, the many things that are not important. And it's not a virtue to make a contract longer, complex, or to draw it out, but, when you feel frustrated that maybe the process is taking longer than you want, or maybe it doesn't meet your expectations, try to understand that, real estate lawyers and design and construction lawyers see this complexity and we're trying to manage it for you so that you can have a good outcome. And, I often think of, an analogy to car buying, and I find, it odd that people's assumptions about the speed and ease of negotiation, vary so much in something like car buying versus signing a design or construction project. I mean, people think nothing about spending, a few days, weekends, negotiating the purchase of a car, which is something that costs a few $1,000s. But, I see a lot of the same people get annoyed, that they're having to spend a few days or a few weeks, negotiating a design or construction contract where there's millions of dollars at stake, okay? And it's something that I face all the time, and I wish that I could get inside the head of people, and set their expectations early. And it's not just my clients. I think my clients' expectations are more in line with reality because I do my best to set those. But it's a lot of times it's the other parties who we're negotiating with who may think that it's more simple than it is. And so, look, don't get on an airplane if you look in the cockpit and it only has 5 or 6 different controls, okay? And don't sign, a bad contract just because you don't understand, why it is taking longer than you may have wanted to get the contract finalized. Don't, shortcut into a bad form, just because, the contract that your lawyer wants you to think about negotiating is a little bit longer and more involved than you might have thought from your, instinct, having not spent a lot of time on this. We lawyers, we design and construction lawyers, we real estate lawyers, we're out to help you and the people that you contract with achieve good outcomes. We're not trying to get an A on our paper. We're not trying to spend more time so we can rack up fees. We're not, trying to make something perfect. I think that we're pragmatic. But we, like the airline pilots, have a greater insight into what is at stake here. And we don't want you to have a bad outcome and wish in a few years that you had a more thoughtful contract, than what you're actually able to achieve. We want you to have the right contract, the right length, the right form, the right project delivery method, the right insurance, to cover you for thousands of things that hopefully you're never going to have to think about because your project goes well. But in the event that you do have one of those troubled projects, believe me, you're gonna find that the time that you spent with your lawyer and he or she, working with the lawyer on the other side to get to a good document, there's tremendous value in that for you.